So before we had science, we had a thing that looked a lot like science called alchemy. Alchemists do something like what scientists do. You see two phenomena in the universe. You hypothesize a causal relationship between those two phenomena. I think this causes that. You design an experiment to see whether you're right. You run the experiment. And this is where alchemy and science diverge, because alchemists don't tell anyone what they think they've learned. They assume that if the experiment didn't come out exactly the way they thought, maybe it's just because they wrote some numbers down incorrectly. They were probably right all along. They never subject their ideas to independent scrutiny, particularly from people who don't like them and want them to fail. And this is why alchemy never learned anything. This is why we had no mobility in the age of alchemy, 500 years of scientific stagnation. And then something amazing happened. Alchemists converted the base metal of superstition into the gold of science through publication, by making their work available for anyone to see and criticize, including and especially the people who hated them and wanted them to fail. Because if your worst enemies couldn't find a problem in your math, then you knew your math was right. So that was progress. That was when we started to publish, when we started to be mobile, when we started to move. And progress was always open. So if you take the software out of this building, it ceases to be a viable building, right? Something this big and ambitious requires some pretty intense software-based HVAC to keep it viable. Take the computers out of a new building, and 5 or 6 years later, you'll probably have to scrape it down to the foundation slab and start over because of black mold and other things that happen when you take the computers out of the building. A building is just a computer that we put our bodies into. And yet, we don't require the same kind of transparency for the software as we do for the hardware, for the building itself. Now we have a new kind of software beyond open and closed. We have forbidden software. And so now we have entire product categories that have regressed to the Middle Ages, that we make in this alchemical way, where we have to trust the manufacturer when they say that their products are safe and sound and of high quality, and that they can't do what we want them to do because of the limitations of the product and not because the manufacturer has imposed a limitation. But today, we actually have devices that change how they operate if they think you're trying to figure out what they do. And of course, you know about Dieselgate, right? German auto manufacturers were tempted beyond their ability to resist to make cars that cheated, that detect whether they were being investigated by an emissions control test suite, and if they thought they were, they changed their emissions characteristics. So these approaches, closed, forbidden, and haunted by demons, these are totally incompatible with capitalism, with competitive markets. Because competition is the right to innovate without permission, even if the manufacturer doesn't want you to. In the absence of competition, manufacturers grow to monopolize their ecosystems. They freeze out third parties who provide service and spare parts and consumables. They end the mobility that allows consumers to choose who their vendors are, to move from an incumbent to a new entrant, to find new ways to do business in the world. So you can buy petrol anywhere for your car, and every car will take any petrol that you put in the tank. But with digital technology, it's possible to design a car whose batteries will only accept electricity that comes from a proprietary nozzle. It's possible to decide whose battery can go in the car. We are moving from the democratic model of technology, where anyone can start a company, where someone who has never taken a computer course but has studied computers and made games and decided that they want to start a new computer company and a new revolution can do so, to a new model, a constitutional monarchy model, where a few companies get to run the digital world and decide who gets to participate in it, and where, in exchange for that, we ask them to take on board certain duties that are so onerous that no new company could perform them, which means that they get to be the only company that we have from now on. Then we have to start protecting big tech from competitors who might undermine their ability to solve all of our problems. If you write a scraper that logs into Facebook on your behalf to filter out the fake news, to stop you from being overwhelmed with sensational content or argument, and just find the good things you want to see on Facebook, that scraper might undermine Facebook's ability to police fake news or police copyright infringement. Once we deputize them to run the system, then we can't let anyone interfere with them running the system. We are marrying the commercial interests of big tech to the social and political goals of our states. So we have much more important problems today than our digital policy. How we regulate our computers is not the most important problem we have today. Climate change, inequality, gender and racial bias, those are problems that are much more important than how we regulate computers. But the digital world is where we will gather to discuss those problems, where we will combine our efforts to solve those problems. The internet is not the thing we should be fighting for, but the thing that we will fight with. We have to preserve the right to inspect, to modify, to improve, and discuss the devices we are entrusting our bodies, our fortunes, and our personal lives to. Anything less is just alchemy. Thank you.